A DNA test was meant to ruin my marriage. Instead, it uncovered a $1 million inheritance. I met my wife Sophia when we were both 28 years old. Our meeting took place during a business conference in Chicago, where we discovered common interests and an instant connection that seemed predestined. Within a few months, we were completely in love, sharing dreams and building plans for a future together. After 2 years of dating full of unforgettable moments, we finally made our union official in an intimate ceremony surrounded by only our closest friends and family. Since then, we've built a peaceful, happy life in Boston, where I work as a civil engineer and Sophia manages a small art gallery downtown. Our routine was perfect: quiet dinners, weekends exploring the city, occasional trips, and the constant feeling that we had found that special person to share our lives with. When our son Lucas was born 5 years ago, our happiness felt complete. He arrived like a ray of sunshine, brightening our lives with his infectious laughter and infinite curiosity. With bright green eyes that contrasted with our brown ones, Lucas became the center of our universe, filling our home with that unique energy that only children can bring. Watching him grow, discover the world, and develop his personality has been the greatest adventure of our lives. We created a solid family routine, full of small traditions that strengthened our bonds every day, from board game nights to the pancake Sundays that Lucas loves so much. 4 years, our family seemed like the kind of picture-perfect you see in TV commercials. United, happy, and seemingly immune to the problems of the outside world. But not everything was as perfect as it seemed at first glance. Daniel, Sophia's brother, has always represented a dark cloud hanging over our happiness. From the first day Sophia introduced us, I felt an inexplicable tension between us. Despite my efforts to cultivate a friendly relationship with my brother-in-law, Daniel seemed determined to see me as an intruder in the family. At first, I thought it was just typical sibling jealousy, something temporary that would eventually dissipate once he realized how much I loved his sister. But as the years passed, it became clear that his dislike for me was deeper and more persistent than I could have imagined. His subtly mean comments and passive-aggressive behavior became so common that I learned to expect them at every family gathering. Daniel's marriage was the first major moment in which his hostility was evident to everyone. As best man, I faithfully followed his instructions to wear a navy blue suit, just like the other groomsmen. However, on the big day, he created an embarrassing scene, accusing me of trying to steal his attention by supposedly wearing a slightly lighter shade than the others. The absurdity of the situation made everyone uncomfortable. After all, he had chosen the outfits for the groomsmen himself, but somehow this turned into yet another reason to attack me. Sophia tried to intervene, explaining that I just followed his directions, but Daniel was determined to turn his own marriage into a battleground against me. That incident marked the beginning of a long series of provocations and conflicts that would test not only my patience but also the stability of our family relationship in the years to come. The rivalry between Daniel and I intensified after Lucas was born. Every milestone in his development became a competition for him, and he constantly compared our son to his own son, Tommy, 2 years older than Lucas. If Lucas started walking, Daniel would mention how Tommy had walked earlier. If Lucas learned new words, he minimized the achievement by saying that Tommy was already speaking complete sentences at the same age. What should have been a reason for celebration between cousins turned into fuel for their unhealthy competitiveness. His nasty comments became so frequent that I began to avoid sharing Lucas's achievements when he was present, just to spare him from having his special moments diminished by unnecessary comparisons. Despite all this, Sophia and I always made a point of remaining calm and not fueling the conflict. We believed that reacting to Daniel's provocations would only make the situation worse and, more importantly, harm the relationship between Lucas and Tommy. We wanted the boys to grow up close, like true cousins and friends, regardless of the tension between the adults. Therefore, we swallowed the nasty comments, smiled in the face of provocations, and tried to maintain peace in family gatherings. It was an exhausting strategy, but we thought we were doing the best for our children. Little did we know that this apparent truce would be brutally broken in a way none of us could have predicted, forever transforming the dynamics of our extended family and revealing secrets that Daniel fought desperately to keep buried. Christmas has always been my favorite time of year, that magical time when we get together as a family, exchange gifts, and create memories that will last forever. This last Christmas, however, would end up becoming unforgettable for the most surprising reasons. As usual, we organized a big dinner at our house, inviting Sophia's parents, Daniel, his wife Amanda, and their son Tommy. Despite the underlying tension between Daniel and I, we tried to keep up appearances for the sake of the kids and the Christmas spirit. The house was beautifully decorated with colorful lights, the aroma of freshly baked cookies filled the air, and Lucas's excitement about Santa's arrival was contagious. Everything seemed normal at first glance, with the traditional exchange of gifts after dinner, until Daniel handed his gift to Lucas with a smile that immediately put me on alert. There was something calculated about that gesture, an anticipated satisfaction that didn't match the supposed spirit of generosity. When Lucas opened the package and found a home DNA testing kit, I initially didn't think much about it. After all, Lucas has always shown an interest in science and experiments, and these kits have become popular gifts in recent years. The boy was genuinely excited, fascinated by the idea of discovering more about his genetic heritage and perhaps meeting distant relatives around the world. He thanked his uncle with a sincere hug, completely unaware of the true intentions behind that seemingly innocent gift. It was only later, as we were tidying up the kitchen after the guests left, that Sophia pulled me aside, her tense face showing concern. In a low voice, she recounted strange comments Daniel had made while the men were drinking coffee in a living room after dinner, cryptic phrases about finally finding out the truth, and how some secrets can't stay hidden forever. Those words sent a chill down my spine. It didn't take me long to connect the dots and realize the true nature of that gift. For years, Daniel had made subtle hints about Lucas's green eyes, a recessive trait that contrasted with the brown eyes that both Sophia and I possess. Anyone with a basic understanding of genetics would understand that recessive traits can skip generations. Sophia's grandfather had green eyes remarkably similar to Lucas's. But Daniel, in his search for ammunition against me, turned this normal genetic trait into supposed evidence of infidelity. The DNA test was not a gift to satisfy Lucas's scientific curiosity. It was a deliberate attempt to sow doubt in my heart about the paternity of our child and possibly destroy my marriage. The anger I felt at that moment was almost paralyzing. How dare he turn something as pure as Christmas into an opportunity for his manipulations? How could he use an innocent child as a pawn in his petty games? Even more disturbing was the realization that this wasn't an impulsive idea. Daniel had planned meticulously, choosing a public moment to present the gift, ensuring we couldn't refuse it without creating an uncomfortable scene in front of the family. He had calculated every detail, probably anticipating weeks of tension between Sophia and me until the results arrived. The premeditated cruelty of that act revealed a level of hostility I had never imagined possible, even from Daniel. Sophia and I talked at length that night, after Lucas fell asleep exhausted from the day's excitement. To my surprise and relief, I never once doubted Sophia's fidelity or questioned Lucas' paternity. "I know my son," he said with conviction, "and I trust you completely. Daniel has always tried to create problems between us, but this time he has gone too far." My unshakable confidence deeply moved Sophia and further strengthened our union against Daniel's sabotage attempts. We decided together that we wouldn't fall into his trap. Lucas could take the test if he wanted, as we knew the results would only confirm what was already obvious to us. We would not allow Daniel's evil to poison our family or shake the trust we have built over the years. Over the next few days, we tried to act normally, although the anger still bubbled beneath the surface. Lucas, completely oblivious to adult tensions, was excited about his new science kit. He read the instructions repeatedly, fascinated by the process and the possibility of discovering more about his ancestry. How could I deny him this educational experience just because his uncle had ulterior motives? With our support, Lucas followed the testing protocol, collecting DNA samples through a simple cheek swab. I helped him prepare the envelope for mailing, explaining that responses would take a few weeks to arrive. Throughout this entire process, I kept a smile on my face, determined not to let Daniel's machinations detract from my son's experience or cloud the magic of the post-Christmas period. What we didn't expect was that Tommy, Daniel's son, watched this whole process with great curiosity. As a 14-year-old teenager, I was naturally interested in questions of identity and origins. When he saw Lucas' enthusiasm for the test, Tommy decided he wanted to do one too. Amanda, always supporting her son's scientific interest, promptly ordered a kit for him, seeing it as an educational opportunity and an activity that the cousins could share. Daniel tried to talk them out of it, making excuses about the waste of money and the inaccuracy of the tests, but Amanda insisted it would be fun for Tommy. Little did she know that this seemingly innocent decision would trigger a storm that would forever change the course of their lives and reveal secrets that Daniel had kept for over a decade. The following weeks passed in an atmosphere of apparent normality, although I could feel the underlying tension whenever I crossed paths with Daniel. He seemed anxious, frequently asking if Lucas' test results had come back yet. His obsessive interest only confirmed my suspicions about his true intentions. When we finally received the email notifying us that the results were available, Sophia made sure to be by my side as we accessed them. As we expected, there were no surprises. Lucas was, without a shadow of a doubt, my biological son. The test confirmed what we always knew, and I secretly smiled imagining Daniel's frustration when he discovered that his plan had failed miserably. Sophia even suggested we text her brother a screenshot of the results, but we decided not to fuel the conflict. After all, we had nothing to prove to him or anyone else. However, the real earthquake was just beginning to form. About a week after Lucas' results, we received an unexpected call from Amanda. His voice sounded strange, a mix of shock and suppressed fury that immediately alerted us that something serious had happened. "Can you come to our house now? I need to talk in person," she asked, declining to provide further details over the phone. We left Lucas with Sophia's parents and drove to their house in Brookline, with no idea of the drama that awaited us. When we arrived, we found Amanda alone in the room, with an expression I had never seen on her face in the 10 years I had known her. Sitting rigidly on the couch, she held a tablet with the results of Tommy's DNA test. The words fell like stones from his mouth. "The test shows that Daniel is not Tommy's biological father." The shock of that revelation hung in the air like a dense cloud. Amanda recounted how, upon receiving Tommy's results, she initially thought there had been an error in the test. He contacted the company, questioned the methodology, and even considered that some sample exchange had occurred. But every check confirmed there was no error. The irrefutable truth was that Daniel shared no genetic material with the son he raised for 14 years. Confronted with the evidence, Daniel initially denied everything, claiming that home DNA tests were notoriously inaccurate. When Amanda insisted on a more formal test at a medical laboratory, he was reluctant with all his might, but eventually gave in to her determination. The results of the second test were even more devastating, as they not only confirmed that Tommy was not Daniel's biological son, but also raised another disturbing question. Driven by the discovery about Tommy, Amanda decided to also test her youngest daughter, Emma, just 7 years old. To her utter dismay, the results showed that Daniel was not her biological father either. The life she had built with so much care and dedication for more than 15 years was, in large part, based on lies. Daniel had kept a devastating secret all this time, creating a perfect family facade while hiding his infidelity. The revelation was like an explosion that completely destroyed the foundations of their marriage. Amanda, always so controlled and patient, now looked like a woman on the verge of collapse, alternating between moments of intense anger and periods of stunned silence. Sophia tried to comfort her as best she could, but what words could alleviate such a profound betrayal? When Daniel finally arrived home and found us there, the tension in the room was palpable. His face paled when he saw Sophia and I sitting next to Amanda, knowing we were aware of everything. He tried to maintain his composure, acting as if everything was under control, but his world was visibly crumbling in front of him. In a moment of confrontation, Amanda demanded to know the identity of the children's biological mother. Daniel initially refused to reveal any information, but when Amanda threatened to hire a private investigator, he finally confessed. Both children were the result of a prolonged affair with a coworker, someone Amanda knew superficially from company events. The cruelty of this revelation was devastating. It was not a single mistake, but years of deliberate, calculated deception. The irony of the situation was not lost on any of us. The DNA test Daniel had given to Lucas with the intention of destroying my marriage ended up exposing his own infidelity and crumbling his carefully constructed life. In a twist that not even the most creative of screenwriters could have imagined, his plan to sow discord between Sophia and me resulted in the exposure of his own darkest secrets. If it weren't so tragic, especially considering the impact on innocent children, we could almost call it poetic justice. The universe seemed to have a peculiar sense of humor, giving Daniel exactly the same pain he tried to inflict on us, only multiplied 1,000-fold. The following days were a real whirlwind. Daniel left home immediately, unable to continue living under the same roof as Amanda. He temporarily moved into a hotel while he dealt with the shame of the exposure and began to process his next legal steps. Amanda, in turn, seemed to have gone into a state of shock, trying to understand how she could have been deceived for so long and worried about the impact of this revelation on her children. Her attempts to maintain her composure for her children were admirable, but it was clear that she was devastated. Within days, she consulted a lawyer and began legal proceedings to dissolve the marriage, determined to protect the children and rebuild her life after this monumental betrayal. "Even though they are not Daniel's biological children, they are and will always be my children," she said with a strength she didn't know she possessed, "and I will do whatever is necessary to protect them from this chaos he has created." The true heart of this family tragedy was, without a doubt, the devastating effect on the children. Tommy, at 14, was at a particularly vulnerable age to process such a revelation. From one day to the next, his world turned upside down. The man he had always known as his father was not his biological father. His parents were separating under extremely painful circumstances, and he now carried the weight of a fractured identity. The transformation in his behavior was immediate and alarming. The happy, outgoing boy we knew had completely withdrawn, becoming quiet and distant. The few times we saw him after the revelation, he barely maintained eye contact, as if ashamed of something that was absolutely not his fault. Emma, although younger and not fully understanding what was happening, felt the tension and responded with frequent crying spells and a constant fear that Daniel would abandon her too, despite his assurances that he would always be her father. Lucas, despite not being directly involved in the drama, was also affected by the emotional turmoil that befell the family. He and Tommy had always been close, more like brothers than cousins, and seeing his best friend suffer like this left him confused and sad. "Why doesn't Tommy want to play with me anymore?" he asked repeatedly, unable to understand the complexity of the situation. Sophia and I tried to explain it in an age-appropriate way, saying that Tommy was going through a difficult time and needed time, but it was clear that Lucas felt the loss of that special connection. In one particularly poignant moment, I found Lucas sorting out his favorite toys to give to Tommy, believing it might make him happy again. The innocence of that gesture almost made me cry, highlighting how adult manipulations end up hurting the most vulnerable. In the midst of this emotional chaos, Daniel began to insistently look for me. First through messages, then increasingly desperate calls, begging for my help to mediate the situation with Amanda. The irony couldn't be more stark. The same man who spent years trying to keep me away from my family, who did everything he could to undermine my marriage, now saw me as a lifeline. His hypocrisy was almost unbelievable. In one of his messages, he wrote, "You are the only one who can help me now. Amanda has always respected you. She will listen to you. Please talk to her. Tell her the children need me." Initially, I ignored all attempts at contact, unable to overcome my anger at what he had tried to do to my family and the suffering he was causing the children with his selfishness. Sophia was categorically against any of our involvement in Daniel's drama. "He dug this hole by himself, now he needs to find his own way out of it," she said, and I understood her position perfectly. 4 years, we dealt with Daniel's provocations and meanness, always maintaining our composure and choosing not to fuel the conflict. Now that his own actions had turned against him, it seemed natural to just watch from afar as he dealt with the consequences. Furthermore, the fact that Sophia was genuinely concerned about her children's emotional well-being deeply impressed me and made me admire her even more. Amanda, with whom he always maintained a good relationship. She believed that helping Daniel would be a way of betraying the trust of her sister-in-law, who was already going through the most difficult time of her life. "We can't side with him after everything he's done," Sophia argued, and her logic was hard to argue with. However, as the days passed and the situation deteriorated further, I began to feel a growing internal conflict. Not for Daniel, whose actions were indefensible, but for the innocent children caught in the crossfire. Tommy and Emma were grieving not only the family breakdown, but also the increasingly bitter battle between their parents. Amanda, consumed with justifiable rage, was determined to limit Daniel's access to the children as much as possible, while he, desperate to maintain some control over the situation, used the children as emotional pawns. The reports we received from mutual friends were worrying. Tommy had stopped going to school, Emma was having frequent nightmares, and the environment in supervised visits was extremely tense and harmful for both of them. It was at this point that I found myself facing a moral crossroads. Should I keep my distance from this chaos as Sophia suggested, allowing Daniel to face the consequences of his actions alone? Or should I, for the sake of the children, try to somehow lessen the devastating impact of this family war? My paternal instinct screamed that Tommy and Emma shouldn't pay for their father's mistakes. As much as Daniel deserved every ounce of the suffering he was experiencing, his children certainly did not. And the more I thought about it, the more I convinced myself that standing idly by, watching those children suffer when maybe I could do something about it, was not who I wanted to be. It wasn't about forgiving Daniel or minimizing his actions, but about recognizing that there were innocent victims who desperately needed adults capable of putting their needs above hurts and resentments. This realization led me to one of the most difficult conversations I've ever had with Sophia. I explained my conflicted feelings, genuine concern for Tommy and Emma's well-being, and my belief that perhaps we could help create a less toxic environment for them during this traumatic time. Sophia initially resisted, worried that any intervention from us would be seen as taking sides, or worse, could drag us into the eye of the storm. "I don't want our family to get sucked into this drama," she argued, and I completely understood her concern. Our priority should be protecting Lucas and our own marriage. But I also believed that sometimes doing the right thing meant taking risks, even when it would be easier to just turn away. "I'm not suggesting that we save Daniel," I explained carefully, "but that we help create a safe space for Tommy and Emma while the adults work out their problems." After several nights of intense discussions, Sophia and I reached a compromise. We would not directly interfere in the divorce process or custody issues. These were matters that Daniel and Amanda needed to resolve between themselves, preferably with the help of qualified professionals. However, we would offer our emotional support to Tommy and Emma, creating opportunities for them to maintain some normality in their lives during this turbulent time. We invited Amanda to bring the children to our house on weekends, providing a neutral environment where they could play with Lucas away from the tension that now dominated their lives. Initially hesitant, Amanda eventually agreed, recognizing that the children desperately needed this outlet. These moments became little oases of normalcy amidst the chaos. Seeing Tommy smile again while playing video games with Lucas, or Emma having fun in our backyard pool, I felt like we were doing the right thing, regardless of how it all started. The legal situation between Daniel and Amanda continued to unfold with increasing intensity. Determined to protect the children from what she saw as Daniel's negative influence, Amanda hired one of Boston's best family lawyers and fought fiercely for primary custody. To everyone's surprise, especially Daniel, the fact that he was not the children's biological father ended up significantly harming his chances in court. The judges seemed disturbed not only by his prolonged infidelity, but more importantly by the deliberate fraud he committed over the years, deceiving Amanda and the children about something as fundamental as his paternity. Daniel's erratic behavior during the hearings, his attempts to manipulate the children, and his refusal to take responsibility for his actions only strengthened Amanda's case. After months of grueling legal battles, the court awarded Amanda primary custody, with Daniel retaining limited and supervised visitation rights, a decision that, while painful for him, clearly prioritized the children's emotional well-being. During this time, we witnessed a stunning transformation in Amanda. The devastated woman we met that fateful night, clutching her DNA test results with shaking hands, gradually gave way to someone stronger and more resilient. She channeled her grief into determination to be the best mother she could be to Tommy and Emma, actively participating in their school lives, taking them to therapy sessions, and creating new family traditions that helped them adapt to their new reality. In a particularly moving conversation, Amanda confided in Sophia that, despite everything, she refused to allow this betrayal to completely destroy the children's view of Daniel. "Regardless of what he did to me, he's still the only father figure they've ever known," she said. "I have to find a way to help them process this betrayal without completely destroying their ability to trust." This ability to separate her anger at Daniel from her concern for her children's emotional well-being deeply impressed me and made me admire her even more.